joining us today. It's a beautiful sunny day, so it's nice to see everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. As you all know, medallions are coming up. The final deadline is looks like March 6th. So if you have any questions on that, please just reach out and let us know. But I hope everyone has some good entries this year. So go ahead and do that. Now, the state conference is in planning right now, but the state board would like everyone's feedback, and they're reaching out to the membership. So you should have received a survey. I believe it was yesterday afternoon. So please go ahead and take a look at that at your earliest convenience and respond to that survey. They really do want your feedback on that. And just give them your thoughts on, it's just a short survey with some questions on your feedback. And then we'll have some information to get that state conference underway. So that would be great. So with that, I will turn it over to Susan to introduce today's program.
And I'm so glad to see such a nice group today. We're so glad to have everyone here. So we're really fortunate this month. We have two speakers for this meeting. The first one is from PRCAWA. So Charlotte Arnold is joining us today from the University of Alabama's PRCAWA group. And she's going to be sharing their work for this year's case study competition for public relations students. This year, their work is titled How Public Relations Professionals Can Restore Quality, Integrity, and Inclusiveness to Public Discourse. They're holding a month-long campaign called To My Face, which aims to change the perception of civil discourse and show how talking to someone is not means for negativity, but positive action. So Charlotte, it's so nice to see you today. We've been looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for everyone for letting me share this campaign with you all briefly. And I gotta say, I'm UA PRCA's president, so I'm very happy to be here at our professional chapter meeting. But I'm here to represent UA's Bateman competition team. And if you're unfamiliar, Bateman is PRCAWA's national case study competition. And like Susan said, our topic this year is how we as public relations professionals can restore quality, integrity, and inclusiveness to civil discourse. So after just a crazy year of a pandemic, a heated presidential election, and social justice movements, we all know that it often seems like public discourse is more divisive than it is productive. But the really good news is that studies show that people want to change the course of civility and civil discourse and recognize that incivility is a problem. So to tackle this issue, we have developed To My Face. And it is a campaign that works towards educating our community on how to engage in civil conversations on campus, in the workplace, and on social media with empathy and respect, as if it were face-to-face communication. So again, thank you so much for letting me briefly share. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay on this meeting for long because I have class, but I'm going to leave our website link in the chat. So please feel free to check out our social media, our toolkit, and our civility advocate pledge. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Charlotte. And good luck. We're looking forward to reading more about that.
Thank you.
Let me grab my notes. Does anybody have any questions for Charlotte before we move on? She may have time for just a few. Well, Charlotte, if anybody comes back with one, I've got your email and I will reach out to you and we can share that information later.
Great, thank you. And I guess one thing I'll touch on, we've developed a toolkit that has a lot of great tools and resources for civility, and I think y'all would be interested in our civility in the workplace section, since y'all are professionals.
All right, thank you. So I'm really happy to introduce our second speaker today. Elizabeth Woodworth is with us. Hi, Liz, good to see you again. Liz founded Wood & Co. in 2016 after more than 20 years of working in marketing and communications. And so I've worked with Liz on developing messaging for our branding campaign and talked with her about numerous other communication initiatives over the years. A huge topic of discussion for Liz is sustainability. It's an area that she has a passion for. She's an avid environmentalist and holds a fundamental belief that efforts to improve our planet's health are most successful when the interests of conservation, public and private sectors intersect. She also believes that an organization's commitment to sustainability is only truly realized if it can effectively communicate that commitment. During her career, Elizabeth has held positions in both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. Her roles have included executive roles in marketing, communications, and sustainability. She's a sought-after speaker and has served on international boards, currently serving on the Board of Trustees for the Institute for American Universities, a nonprofit educational institution based in France. Liz received a BA in International Studies and French from the University of Richmond, an MBA from the Wharton School, and an MA in International Studies from the University of Pennsylvania. She lives in DC metropolitan area with her husband, Eric, her son and daughter, and multiple pets. So it's really my honor to have Liz here with us today. I'm so excited to hear from you.
Thank you, Susan. And speaking of multiple pets, you may hear my dog barking in the background, so please forgive me in advance for that. Susan, you said that I might be able to share my screen. Is that still possible?
You should be able to, yes.
Okay, let me see. Let's see here. Share screen, open up my presentation, and there we go. Okay. Let's see. Can you all see that? All right. So just a couple of things before I get started. Susan said that you all are an amazing and great group of folks, and this is an informal discussion. I really want it to be helpful for you all. I suspect that a lot of this will be stuff that you already know and that you use every day, but hopefully some of it will be new and also some of it will be a refresher. But in the event that you have a question or if something's not clear, just raise your hand and I'd be happy to stop. I have no issue with that, and I'll leave some time at the end for questions. Susan, just remind me what the timing is. It's about a half an hour. Is that what you said?
Yeah, our goal is to have everybody done a few minutes before 1. So as much time as you need for the presentation, and then save time for a few Q&A at the end.
Perfect. Okay, I'll watch my clock, and I'll probably funnel a lot of stuff to you all in a short period of time, but I'll also give my presentation to Susan at the end that she can share with you all. So happy to do that. So just a quick sort of introduction to Wood & Company. We do comprehensive communications, marketing, public relations, as Susan said, mostly in the sustainability and forestry space. We also provide strategic guidance in terms of corporate sustainability strategies, social responsibility strategies, ESG, et cetera. And we do a little bit of event planning. I don't do weddings, but I do meeting planning, board of directors meetings, and that kind of thing that are very strategic in nature. So that's all I'll say on the company. Very quickly, we'll just walk through some of the basic steps that you need to take, or that I would recommend you take before you start telling your story as an organization. I know you all come from a wide variety of organizations. Some are for-profit, some are nonprofit, some are public agencies. So I wanted to try to keep it as broad as possible so that it resonates for a broad group of organizations. And then we'll get into how best to share your story. What are some of the elements of sharing a story? What is a story? It's not just about Harry Potter and Hansel and Gretel. It's really anything, any message that you want to get across and that you want people to take away about your organization can be a story. And then just a brief couple of slides on ways to engage, and then a little bit of social media as well. All righty. I'm sure if most of you are in communications or marketing or related, you probably have been told by some of your colleagues or even the leadership teams, oh, communications, it's so easy. We can talk, we can read, we can communicate, and everybody seems to know how to do it really well, or at least they think they do. But as you all know, it's not as easy as some might think. And some people even talk a little bit like prehistoric people. So I think one of the biggest and most important steps that an organization needs to take, a communications team or a marketing team needs to take before they even start mapping out a path for communications is really identifying what their goals are and what their objectives are. Goals are sort of where you want to be. Do you want to have increased awareness? Do you want to have raise funds, et cetera, raise an X amount of funds? And objectives are how you're going to get there, right? And so really map out and identify your goals and objectives before you even begin the process of messaging, message development, and then certainly communication strategy. Another critical step that is often overlooked is identifying who your audience is, right? So, and I've just listed a few examples. There certainly may be others, but your clients certainly are an audience. Your partners, anybody in your supply chain, employees. A lot of people overlook their employees or their leadership team as an audience, and in some cases, they're the most important audience within your sphere. Board members, if you have a board of directors, and other stakeholders. So it's really important to stop and take stock of who your audience is for specific communications and messaging. And there is likely going to be different messaging for each of those audiences, although some of the messaging will be the same. And then finally, what makes a message, right? And what makes it effective. And these are just some thoughts here. You definitely need to know who your audience is. You're not going to talk about P&L and longevity of productivity to your everyday Joe and Jane who might buy your product. You want to be engaging, interesting. You want to add some value. Remember, people are so busy these days, and there is so much stimulation, whether it's social media, news. As Charlotte mentioned, we've had a crazy year, right? And very, very difficult year. So people don't have time for listening to things that are irrelevant to them, right? Make sure also that your messaging is aligned with your organization's mission. As one of the things that I often do with clients, and Susan mentioned this actually, is just developing what I call a message tree, but essentially having a message document that is living, and you have messages, a collection of messages that are for the trunk of the company, right? The tree trunk, that are applicable to all audiences. And then you have branch messaging that is specific to different audiences, but make sure always that messaging is aligned with the organization's mission. And then finally, include a strong call to action in your messaging, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but if if your audience if they don't have something to hang on to and an action, the next step, you often just kind of go by the wayside, right? But if you engage your audience and give them something to act on, then you're much more likely to get your message across. A few elements in terms of messaging, and this goes into the story telling as well. But you always think of the journalist's rule of, what, where, why, how, and when kind of thing. It's just that same idea, but you want to start with the why. Why does this matter? Why does this matter to your organization? Why does it matter to the audience? And why does it matter to the world, to the betterment of the world, right? And what's the mission? What is the positioning, sort of where, what it is that you're either selling or providing a service for, or what is the action that is happening, and how is it happening? And that's where you get into some details. how are you differentiated with, how is your organization different from other organizations? And then certainly what is next, sort of what's your vision for the future? Now, this is really broad, and I don't have time to go into very specific examples, but think about your own organization and think about how you would fill in each of those 5 bullets. And is it consistent across the organization, or would you say that different teams within your organization have different answers to that question? These are some of the exercises that are really, really important to go through before you embark on a communication strategy or a path of storytelling. All right, moving on to well, I guess I could pause there. Does anyone have any questions or, oops, I'm jumping ahead here. Is there any comments or questions at all?
I have a question, sort of.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, right now, most people probably have, kind of one goal, which is to survive the year. But how do you encourage, or what's your take on having multiple kind of messages or goals? Like if an organization has so many things that they want to accomplish, do you try to encourage them to narrow it down, to focus on something specific for an extended period of time and then move on to the next one? Or is it okay to kind of have multiple arms going out there and trying to reach different goals? Or is it better to streamline?
So I mean, this is the perfect question for what I've just talked about in terms of this. These are the exercises that are really important, because I do think to some extent it's super important to streamline, right? Prioritize what your objectives and goals are, prioritize your audiences, and really understand what it is you're trying to do right now. And then, maybe your goals and objectives for a year from now are going to be different. Everything is changing so quickly. To your point, we're just trying to figure out how to get through the year. And so it's incredibly important to make sure that you kind of know what your true north is and stick to that. Now, that's not to say that you should just focus on one goal at all, but definitely have in mind and on your radar what those goals are and who you want to reach first and foremost. Does that help? So it's kind of a hybrid of both. All right. So really quickly, the rule of 7, some of you probably know this, and I'm sure, in fact, you most likely do, especially given the audience that I have today. But it's just a reminder, repetition is okay. Redundancy is okay, right? The rule of 7 basically states that someone has to hear something 7 times before they either take action or really digest it and understand it. So that could be your call to action, right? If you're fundraising and you give them 7 ways to give. But that is a really important rule, and it's not so much the number 7 that's important, it's the repetition and the redundancy. So often we're told to be engaging and be interesting, and when we're especially on Zoom and this day and age of virtual, we have to make sure that we're not boring and we're saying things that are resonating. But we also need to repeat ourselves if we are in communications and trying to get our message across. Now, the repetition might be a surround sound, right? It might be a press release, as well as social media, as well as a website blog, as well as a radio interview. It might be a number of things, but you're always repeating that same message to get the point across. Just a plug for storytelling, and I got this from a PR firm's presentation at one point, so I can't take credit for it, but they say that statistically speaking, stories that have a narrative, that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a conclusion are going to be remembered 22 times more than just a list of facts. So if you think about it in a way, I'll just put it in terms of sustainability, since that's my safe space. A company could just have on their sustainability webpage all of the things that they're doing, X, Y, and Z. They're certified to X, Y, and Z. Their training process is this and that, and this is the laundry list of things that they're doing. Or they could talk about the importance of sustainability to the employee base, why it's important to their employees that they leave the world a better place than they found it for their kids. What are the barriers? What are the challenges that they have to face? How are they overcoming those barriers? And what are the results of their work so far? And what's their vision for the future? Now, what's more interesting, right? And so it's so important to be able to provide a narrative to anything that you're trying to convey in terms of your organization. And I would say that, and my last point here, stories are the link between the heart and the head, or the head and the heart. It's okay to complement that narrative with facts and data and statistics. Just using the sustainability example, you can have a dashboard that is a link off of that narrative, right? And that intro to your sustainability strategy. You can have a dashboard of where you want to be in 5 years and where you are now and how you're getting there, those kinds of things. But if you don't supplement that with something that tugs at the heartstrings, then you're not going to get your message across as effectively. Think about the Super Bowl ads. The ones that you remember to this day are the clever ones that actually pulled at your heartstrings, right? They're not the ones that just said we're the best product out of, we're the best laundry detergent versus all of the competitors. And then what are sticky stories? Sticky stories, just like those ads for the Super Bowl, are the ones that stay with you, the ones that make you think, the ones that make you cry. I'm a crier, so I know not everybody is, but I have to have a box of tissues with me whether I read a book or watch TV. But they have to be timeless. Think about how valuable a story that you basically release with a press release, and then 2 months later you refresh that news with social media amplification, and then 2 months later your CEO pens a blog on your website about it. The longer the shelf life your story has, the better off you'll be, and the more that you can more you can leverage it over time. It needs to resonate, as I said, needs to resonate, make a connection with people. And that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning with audiences, right? You need to understand your audience. You need to understand what they care about, what is important to them, so that you can actually craft a story and messaging that resonates with them and that means something to them. Relevancy is incredible. We're not going to talk about the importance of a steel band around a wooden wagon wheel anymore, because it's irrelevant. No one cares about it. We don't use it. It's not relevant, right? That's a kind of an extreme example, but it really makes the point that if we have just a moment to capture people's attention, and if we're not relevant, we're not going to do it. And then real, and real is not only in terms of real stories, but real photos. I always counsel my clients for their website, don't use stock imagery. Get your employees to take photos. Get if you can't afford in your budget a professional photographer, just collect photos across your stakeholder group of photos that are relevant to what you do as an organization, and put those up there. This day and age, the smartphones cameras are so amazing, and you can really get great high definition, high resolution photography with even just selfie shots, right? So real stories, real people, real photos. You've got to be real. This is an analogy that that I find is really relevant. I heard on a radio, it was a radio, oops, sorry about that, too quick there. A radio show one time was talking about how there is a universal order of all stories. And the guy was talking about how stories as classes as like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars and Harry Potter and even the Grimm's fairy tales and so forth all share this trajectory. And essentially is the character is introduced And in your case, the character might be your company, it might be an employee, it might be one of your customers, whatever the focus of your story is that you want to tell. What do they want, and who are they? Sort of introducing them. And then moving then into barriers. So in any of those stories that I just mentioned, there's always this big challenge. It might be a bad guy, or it might be impossible odds, or what have you. But there are always going to be barriers, right? And so, for example, it might be, you know, if the company wants to implement a sustainability strategy, just to pull on that example one more time, they may have a barrier that's budget, right? Or they might have a corporate culture that hasn't always been conducive to that, or, you know, or a client base that's not conducive to that. And so what are those challenges? What are those barriers? And then how did you overcome those barriers? Sort of how did you work around or go over the barriers? What happened? What were the results? And what does that mean for the future, right? And so if you think about sort of your even very simple stories and goals and objectives of using development again, what's your challenge? Who is it? Who are you? What is your challenge? What's the barrier? How are you overcoming that? And then what's the future? And if you think about each of those milestones in that story, you'll have an effective story right in front of you. Now, some of the stories and some of the messaging and some of the things that you want to get across are incredibly complex, right? Each of your organizations has its own personality, its own set of challenges, its own set of assets. And so how do you make a story simple, and how do you simplify it? If you're talking to your employees and you're talking to your leadership team, then you might be able to get a little more complex and share a little more detail, right? And have inside baseball. However, if you're talking to potential clients or partners or the public in general, then you're going to want to make it as simple as possible. So how do you do that? It's very, very simple. You go back to those original exercises that I talked about in the beginning. Who is your audience? What do you want to get across to them? What does the audience care about the most? And then shape your story based on that, right? So if it's your board of directors and you're preparing for a board meeting, who are they? What do they care about? They care about the productivity of the organization, the longevity of the organization, making sure that you're aligned with mission, and talk about sort of the challenges and barriers that you're overcoming with those results, right? Very different than the story you're going to tell to your potential client. So this is, you know, this is nothing new, right? Some of the ways to engage, because even the best stories don't tell themselves, right? And so the thing that I want you to take away is not, there's nothing new here. You're aware of all of these different tools, all of these marketing materials, all of these ways to get your message across. But what I want you to take away from this is to know that you can actually, again, tell your same story in all of these different ways, right? It might be print. It might be a press release that's much more formal, newsletters, fact sheets, brochures, etc. Infographics are a great way to tell your story, actually, with visuals, right? And it's a great, quick sort of one-stop shop for the information that you're trying to convey. Op-ed pieces, written by probably many of you in the communications teams, but bylines of your CEO or the leadership team or a partner, and using champions to tell your story for you. On the online side of things, on the electronic side of things, you of course have your website, blogs. Blogs can serve the same purpose as sort of op-ed pieces in print materials, podcasts, videos, etc. And then social media. And the reason I have social media bolded is because it's the one channel in all of these that allows you to engage, that allows you to have a dialogue, that allows you to go back and forth. Everything else is a one-way street, right? You are talking to your audience, but they are not able to respond to you. Social media provides a window of engagement. And so, which is why it's so powerful. I'm rapidly approaching 50. And so you can make general assumptions, which will be largely very correct about my technological abilities and my abilities on social media. I do know, however, it's incredibly powerful because you can engage with your audience. So what can you talk about on social media? You can help introduce your character, your organization, your employee that you want to focus on. You could talk about your history, the foundation of your organization, the mission of your organization. You can do that through little stories on Twitter or Facebook, etc. You can engage your partners by pulling in their name and their identification on whatever channel it is. You can talk about your community and leverage stories that will affect and impact your community. Again, you can go through that whole trajectory of talking about your challenges and how you've overcome them, talking about your victories, talking about your vision and your path forward. Your sustainability platforms, what is it about your company that is making the planet better? What is it about your organization that's making the world better? Diversity, equity, inclusion is a huge topic now on social media. Charlotte was just mentioning that earlier in the beginning. And then, of course, events. If you're having a fundraiser or you're having a conference or some of your leadership team is planning to attend. All of this can help you tell your story and also show your story through visuals, videos, etc. And then it allows your audience to engage with you, to comment, and to go back and forth and to follow your story as it progresses. And then lastly, and I just want to make sure we have time for questions and a good discussion too, but lastly, I would say it can be very overwhelming, especially when we talk about social media and then all of the channels and tools that you have at your disposal for telling your story. But don't stress out, because you can leverage what already exists. If your organization has a newsletter that it sends out to its employees every week, or a intranet that it uses to convey information, use those tools and see how they can be improved and see how they can be can evolve to make sure that they're better telling the story that you want to convey. You can also collaborate certainly with your partners, with your supply chain partners, with your community partners, with the organizations or associations that you work with. See if you guys you can basically collaborate and tell a story together, how you work with each other, how you complement with each other, or how you what you do for each other, one for another. And then lastly, and this seems obvious, but take a look at what's out there, right? And look at websites, look at social media channels, see what others are doing, see what your competitors are doing, see how you can differentiate from them, but also use their best practices, learn from them, learn from the best, and then emulate that. So I will stop there. I had turned all the faces off so I wouldn't get distracted by you all, but I'll put you back on and take any questions that you might have or comments, or just engage in a discussion with you all.
Liz, you talked about social media. What are the best tools to use to engage on social media? Is it video, podcasts? What are the things that are really resonating on that right now?
Well, I think that podcasts seem to be the it thing right now, certainly across a number of different age groups and demographics, because they can be downloadable and so forth. I would say that you never want to post anything on any of the major platforms without a visual. So that's kind of rule number one. And that always captures people's attention. Ideally, it's a relevant visual and not just some random visual that you're putting there to capture someone's attention. And then certainly videos. The trick with videos, though, is that, again, people have a very, very minimal amount of time, right? And the whole scrolling through, you want to catch their attention. You want to get a couple of messages across that you want to get across, and hopefully they'll click through to a video. It's a great way to actually drive people to your website, but you all already know that. And if there is a press release that you've just announced or a video that you've just put up about your organization, you can drive people to that. But I would definitely suggest multiple sort of stimulations, multiple channels, right? And make sure that people are not only reading, but watching and feeling and having it resonate. And in terms of the actual platforms, there are different platforms for different audiences, right? And so it's largely demographic. Certainly, Facebook is for the old folks. My kids who are 14 and 13 roll their eyes at Facebook. Oh, Mom, you're such a boomer, is what I get a lot, which I'm not a boomer, by the way, but they call me a boomer anyway. But Twitter certainly is also going that way. So the platforms that we know as adults and started with are now used primarily for older or different segments. TikTok is huge amongst the younger set, Generation Z, et cetera. And Twitch is an online streaming service now that my kids love to watch. And it's a little bit scary because I think there's a lot on there. But just understand your audience and then choose the channels that you want. And it definitely takes a little research to make sure that you're going to use the most effective channels for your audience that you're trying to target.
What other questions do we have for Liz?
And Liz, I have a question about podcasts. So do you feel, is it okay to just do an audio podcast, or do you feel a visual was needed as well? We do a lot of stuff already on YouTube, but I didn't know if the production was needed in the need for a podcast. I've always seen it as something that you listen to.
Yeah, so that I don't think it's necessary. I think if you're doing a video, it's a different, like you said, it's YouTube, and there's just a definite different set of parameters that you work with. The podcasts tend to be, at least now, downloaded while people are running or exercising or shopping or grocery shopping or doing everyday tasks, and it gives them something to listen to. So they're awesome. They're awesome for conveying messages, but really you're not going to be sitting down and watching them. So I think you should not feel the need to actually evolve into videography unless you feel like that's a channel that you want to then progress to, right? And with videos, I would suggest certainly not just having an interview. As popular as Oprah Winfrey was when I was a kid coming along, sitting there watching people talk to each other, it only goes so far in terms of capturing your attention. So I would recommend continue with the podcast. Make sure all of those things I was talking about, your story and your messaging, relevancy, resonancy, making sure that it tugs at your heartstrings, that talks to your head and your heart. Those kinds of things, those rules you need to follow for podcasts just as much as anything else.
Any other questions? Well, Liz, I've got your info. So if anyone has any other questions, I will definitely put them in touch with you, or just we'll correspond back and forth. But thank
Absolutely.
you so much for.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was a great discussion. And like you said, these are things that we've all heard, but it's great to be reminded of what those priorities are to do these things. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
We had a great crowd today. Amy, before I turn it back over to you, I just wanted to kind of give everybody an update for what we're going to be doing next month's program. So we're going to do things just a little bit differently this year. We usually have 2 joint meetings with the American Advertising Federation in Tuscaloosa. This year we're going to do that again, but it's going to be 2 months in a row. So in March, the AAF is going to be hosting the meeting. Students from the University of Alabama's Capstone Agency will share stories from this year's Create-a-thon, which is the annual 24-hour marathon undertaken to benefit some of the area's most deserving nonprofits. This was comprised of 60 students and more than 1,500 hours of volunteer time between students and faculty for a charitable output of more than $40,000 in donated work. So because they are hosting the meeting, it's going to be on their normal meeting day, which will be Thursday, March 18th at noon. We'll be sure that everybody gets the link to that. And then in April, we'll be hosting them, and we're going to be welcoming Dr. Jamison Hayes, who's an associate professor of advertising and public relations at UA, to talk to us about using data to drive messaging. That meeting is going to be on Tuesday, April 27th, and everybody will get the link for that as well. So Amy or Megan, I'll turn it back over to you if you have any closing thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Great job on that. That is some fantastic programming coming up. Susan's been doing an excellent job with programming this year. So if you've missed any meetings, I would encourage you to make sure you put those on your calendar. And thank you, Liz. That was very helpful information, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to receiving your slides because I did not take notes. So I look forward to that. For anyone who joined us after the announcements, members, you should have a survey in your email from state. Please do take that. And they look forward to receiving your medallions entry. So don't let all that hard work go unrecognized. I hope you all have your entries ready. So unless anyone has anything else, we'll be adjourned.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.